Now, global decision makers met at the 47th World Economic Forum in Davos this January to explore why it is imperative for leaders to respond collectively with credible actions to improve the state of the world under the theme Responsive and Responsible Leadership. Well, Kunle Elebute, National Senior Partner, KPMG Nigeria, and Chairman, KPMG West Africa, joins me to explore how this impacts economies in West Africa. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kunle.
Thank you. Good morning.
And of course, taking a look at that theme, responsive and responsible leadership, what comes to mind when you hear such a theme? Well,
at WEF, that theme was focused at corporations, because the essence is that corporations and stakeholders and investors have a major role to play on the impact they can have on the global world economy. As you know, there are some companies that have a market cap that is even bigger than GDPs of countries. I think just before WEF, there was an article in the Western media about the top 10 wealthiest business people globally, accounting for something like 80% of the GDPs in emerging market countries. So in effect, what we've tried to do was to come up with a compact for responsive and responsible leadership aimed at corporations, shareholders, CEOs, asset managers, investors, having a corporate governance framework that takes a long-term view on the prosperity of the global economy. That's essentially what's all about. All
right, then. So how is this going to be working together, of course, with governments around the world? I mean, around the world, to a large extent, they really do determine, how well the business community really does survive or perform in any given country. So what's the role? How do they come into this whole picture?
I think the number of ways they can come in. I mean, in some respects, there will be some people who will say government should just leave business alone and let business just do what it needs to do and thrive. But however, of course, as you know, government also has to be responsive if business is irresponsible. So long as business can have take a long-term view. The challenge, of course, is that businesses always have quarterly earnings to respond to the stock exchange. They have a short-term approach to doing things, and in effect, sometimes can take the wrong decisions that do not favor the society at large. So in effect, there needs to be a partnership between government and business, such that whatever this partnership is, ultimately generates economic prosperity for the people. That's the bottom line, essentially. So you want to see economic growth, you want to see reduction of poverty, you want to see basically everything that's required for increasing standard of living, especially in that part of the world, especially in West Africa, where you have lots of poverty, where you have lack of education and healthcare, you don't have infrastructure. So there needs to be responsiveness on both sides. And I think at the bottom of all these things is responsible leadership. Leadership that knows that you can't wait until there's a disaster like Ebola. You can't wait until there's a massive unemployment. You've got to be responsive to what's required of your society. And ultimately, political leaders have to deliver on economic prosperity for the people.
Now, I'm more interested in understanding how the business community is going to, work towards this. You just talked about, of course, the corporation. Businesses are set up, of course, to make money to begin with.
Yes.
And of course, I believe the discussions at WEF as well is channeled towards the betterment of humanity.
Sure.
How do you think businesses set up with different objectives and goals will come together to channel this one cause?
Well, the main essence at WEF was for businesses to sign allegiance to this compact. And this compact essentially was to develop a corporate governance framework that takes a long-term view of the market, essentially, so that businesses will balance the needs of society with the needs of business. And let's come down in practical terms. What does that mean? What it means is that in the boardroom, in effect, that board members have a responsibility to take a long-term view of the strategy of the business, or how the business can impact society positively, and not just about making profits, but if you make profits and you will destroy the environment, for example, then you've got to say to yourself, I've got to put money aside for fixing the environment, or you've got to say to yourself, what other options do I have in making profits without having to destroy the environment? What can I do such that the value chain of my business increases employment? So if I know that I can make more money by using robots in Nigeria, for example, whereas there's unemployment, why should I use robots in Nigeria? Let me go out there and create employment in my business. It doesn't mean that you won't make profits, but it's just a decision has to be taken in the context of a long-term perspective and also affecting society positively. That's basically it.
Now, Kunle, whose responsibility is it to enforce this? Let's take a look at what's happening here in Nigeria. Of course, with the Niger Delta issue, lots of money has been made from that region, with very little given back to these people. Now, we have a situation where, of course, the call has been on for so many years. Protests are still going on. But these people still feel disenfranchised from government. I mean, this absence of government happening there. The companies, to some extent, are also refusing to take responsibility for what they have done. Now, when you find a situation whereby there's a lack of confidence in institutions supposed to take care of this disenfranchised people, what happens? Who comes into the picture at this point in time?
There has to be a balance. I mean, the companies who pay, they pay taxes, they pay royalties, and they pay personal income taxes to the respective governments. Now, on the side of government, you need to have governance in the region. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's been the right kind of governance in the region. Because if you had the governance in the region, the right kind of governance in the region, the partnership would have been strong enough to ensure that those things that happened there shouldn't have happened in the first instance. And secondly, also, they should have been able to, enable the economy in those places. And there's no reason why, especially when oil prices were extremely high in the late 90s and early 21st century, where the whole South could have been one of the largest construction sites in the world, because the kind of money that state governments were making, in addition to what the companies were making, they put together some sort of fund for infrastructure. That place would have been totally different. But if the governance on one side, because the companies have boards and they have shareholders and they meet the requirements of governance and they meet the requirements of paying taxes and royalties to the government. If the state governments themselves also have the right governance and deliver the goods to the people, the partnership will be simple, and easy, and the results will be happening. If you take the Lagos State, for example, since 1999, the tax revenues in the state have ballooned. Why? Because people can see what the government is doing with the taxpayers' money, and therefore you and I have confidence to say, I'll pay my taxes because I know that they'll deliver good roads for me, they deliver good schools, and so on and so forth. So it's a two-way street. Absolutely.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much, Kunle. I've been talking to Kunle Elebute, National Senior Partner, KPMG, of course, West Africa, on that particular issue.